This is the management plan for Newcastle's renewal, a report which has taken Brian Eastoe 4 months to complete. Now, almost a year after the earthquake, the report states there is still much work to do, and although the next 2 or 3 years will be crucial, it could take up to a decade for the city to fully recover. The report identifies 5 main areas of concern, but does not elaborate on exactly what these mean. Mr Eastoe is quick to stress this is just the groundwork for a long and complicated recovery process. Included in the report is a list of temporary positions which would need to be created to ensure efficient renewal. Some of these have been filled, others are awaiting council approval. The report does not outline how much money is needed to fund the new positions or where it will come from. It suggests publicity is important to the city's growth, and as such, a shopfront should be established in the Civic to emphasise council's positive attitude towards renewal. All in all, the report makes few concrete recommendations, and it will be up to council tonight to transform words into action. The 1990 school year ends in just 2 days, and already the grounds and buildings at Glendale Public have taken on a look of desolation. Early this morning, removalist vans began taking equipment and furniture away, most of it bound for the nearby schools pupils will transfer to. This week, only a handful of students have been attending classes, their parents determined to see out to the very end the school they fought so hard to keep. The state government announced its closure in October last year, sparking a storm of protests and letters from the local community, but to no avail. The 47 students and 3 staff finally giving in and making alternative arrangements for school next year. What is to happen to the site is still undecided, but no matter what happens, students, staff and parents vow while they may have to close the gate on lessons, the fond memories of the days in the old school yard will never be erased. Alderman Geddes bases his claim on comparisons between council pay levels and those of the private sector, where he says senior executives are paid anything up to $180,000.
Council's losing senior staff because we're not competing against the public sector in government or the private sector, and people are being offered far better salaries away from local government.
According to Alderman Geddes, even councils similar to Newcastle are offering executives more pay. In Wollongong, however, the town clerk receives $81,700, while in Newcastle, town clerk Barry Lewis gets $80,000. The other positions are also fairly comparable, with the director of each division in Wollongong on $69,500 and those in Newcastle on $65,000. Although Alderman Geddes would not name any staff, he says he is aware of senior people who have left or are considering leaving the council because the pay is simply not high enough.
I'm aware we are losing them, and I'm very fearful we're going to lose more.
Alderman Geddes also wants to know the progress of negotiations on the performance agreements for the town clerk and city engineer. It's been over a year since the matter went to the Industrial Commission.
I think that we've treated both those gentlemen very shabbily, and I feel that they've been extremely patient and extremely loyal to council, and they've accepted second-rate salaries when in fact they're entitled to much more.
The end of this school year is a milestone for Mount View. It's the first year of grade 12, the first time students from the school have sat for their HSC. It will also be the last year the 6-year-old school will be housed in demountable classrooms. New buildings should be completed by next term. So today's presentation ceremony was particularly special. The school also received an award from the Director General of Education, recognising the excellence of its music faculty. Teachers Lorraine Jeffrey and Maria Tolfrey have built a strong and talented choir and a 40-piece orchestra from a department which just 3 years ago consisted of only a couple of recorders. The 60-member choir has performed at the Sydney Opera House in the secondary school's concert and is growing rapidly as performing arts becomes an important part of the school's curriculum.
This is a routine local boat owners will become increasingly familiar with over the summer. From January the 1st, new laws will be introduced preventing boat overloading, while penalties for failing to carry a life jacket will jump from $80 to $400. Boat owners who pass the inspection will receive a safety check sticker. They will also receive a vessel capacity plate with their registration renewals, which will specify the number of people permitted on board. The new enforcement is a direct response to several boating tragedies, including the Ngluka incident at Nelson Bay. The MSB says it's determined to enforce the new conditions.
Well, on the lake here on a busy day there'll be 7,000 vessels, possibly 5,500 on Port Stephens, so it's 12,500 in this area alone. I think that most people are quite aware of the regulations, but of course when people go out and there's a few extra friends, they put them on board and have no consideration for those people, but we're going to make sure that those people are protected.
To say the Falcons are going to be a new power in 91 could not be more apt. The signing of seasoned performers Jerry Everett and Adelaide 36ers star Al Green added not only maturity but strength to the lineup. And now yet another heavyweight has joined the ranks, Jason Joins. Fresh from a season with the Westside Melbourne Saints, he played alongside Al Green with the 36ers the season prior, and his skills and strength caught the veteran's eye.
Al Green was very high on him and thought that we should be looking at him, and then he came out on the free agent list and we notified his club that we're very interested in talking to him. We brought him up yesterday and had fairly lengthy meetings, and he signed for 2 years.
Joins' signing gives the Falcons a 12-man squad, and with only 10 to receive a berth each match, Ken Cole is certain competition will be keen. In fact, he says no one is assured of a game and past performances will account for little. Right now, the players are on vacation, but they're due back at the Broadmeadows Stadium on January 14 to resume training in earnest.
Dwindling stocks of prawns and fish off the New South Wales coast have led the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries to draft a management plan. A commercial fishing advisory council was set up with elected industry members to represent fishermen. But they say they've had little or no input and that committee members have acted in their own interests.
It's grossly unfair. It's only looking after a few. Most of the ECMAC members seem to be advantaged pretty well by it, but the majority are affected badly.
The problem is that there are too many boats fishing the waters between Sydney and Tweed Heads. The plan recommends reducing the catches of some operators based on boat, engine and net size, and enforce these with severe penalties for breaches. Newcastle's fleet consists mostly of small but high-powered boats using large nets, but the fishermen are willing to compromise.
We're all prepared to take a reduction in effort. We all agree there should be some, but it should be done more fairly.
As well as the outlay for the boat, fishermen must buy their endorsements or licences to trawl for prawns or fish. Under the new plan, these are terminated with the sale of the boat, greatly reducing its value and the return to the fishermen. A meeting will be held in Ballina next Wednesday, aimed at heading off the changes that will be enforced from January. Member for Port Stephens, Bob Martin, will accompany the fishermen.
At the end of the day, we've got to have a fishery that's viable, not only for this generation, but the next generation and the generation afterwards. So it's got to be consultation and working together, not just dictatorially telling people and they're not prepared to work with it.
It was back to work for Chris Nash today, just 24 hours after receiving the most pleasant surprise of his life, a WorkSkill Australia gold medal.
I thought I had a chance because I actually won the qualifying heat, but on the first day of the 3-day final I made a bit of a blunder on one of the drawings, so I thought I might still pick up a medal, but I got a bit of a surprise.
The win will see him represent his country in next year's WorkSkill Olympics, but the young draftsman's future wasn't always so bright. When he left school in 1987, Chris got the cold shoulder from employers and joined a TAFE drafting course as a last resort.
Rode away to quite a few companies and applications and found things in the paper to write away for, but couldn't seem to get a job, so went to tech and it all started from there.
Chris is sure he's not the only talented young person who's felt the brunt of the unemployment problem.
Floodlighting the International Sports Centre is expected to cost up to $500,000. Sports Minister Bob Rowland-Smith delivered a hefty share of that amount today, with the ISC Trust to make up the shortfall.
It will give the Newcastle Knights an added boost so far as training is concerned. It will also allow for night games, which I think is even more important. This is a magnificent setup. Newcastle Knights have attracted more people to their games than any other rugby league club, so it's a great thing. It's happening.
The last night's home game under lights was the June 89 clash with St George. The club now looks forward to more night games. Diversification is also on the drawing board, with negotiations underway to promote other sports at the ground.
Well, we're currently speaking to some people about staging a gridiron game here in the first week in July between two college sides. The universities from California and from Idaho will be out here touring Australia with another 6 sides, and we're looking at promoting one of the games up here.
The ISC Trust is now considering tenders for the floodlighting project, with a decision expected early January. Trust officials say the lights should be installed by June.
The Trust are to be commended on what they've done, because not only are they putting the lighting up now, they've done all this work outside, which a lot of people thought the Knights had done, and unfortunately we're not in that sort of a financial situation. But just the improvements and beautification around the whole sporting area now is really going to turn it into a top-class facility for Newcastle.
The first Maitland signal box went underwater in the 55 flood. Since then, signalling and switching was done from this elevated building. Manual levers have given way to push-button operation in this air-conditioned signalling nerve centre. 120,000 kilometres of bundled copper communications wires feed banks of relays that control one of the state's busiest coal, freight and passenger junctions. It was nicknamed a spaghetti junction because of its complicated overlap of lines. The intricate and costly maintenance knot has now been unravelled to allow 3/4 of the state's coal, more than half its freight, and the busy North Coast passenger services to go their separate ways through Maitland. Assistant Transport Minister Bob Rowland-Smith added the finishing touch to a 15-month track replacement and signal box construction project.
And it is now with great pleasure that I officially declare the upgraded Maitland Junction and signal box open.
It's the shape of things to come throughout the state's network, but in 5 years' time, this junction could be controlled by remote from Sydney.
In time, State Rail is committed to essentially a centralised control of all train operations. This is essentially an interim step.
By mid-afternoon, there was barely a space left for those intending to take a close look at the proceedings. Some were even forced to take an offshore vantage point for a look in at almost 8 hours of non-stop entertainment. It was a spectacular sunset that launched the evening program, with most people wide-eyed and wholly involved in the joys of Christmas. It was a sea of happy faces, flickering candlelight, and the participation of people of all ages that kept the entertainers going. They were playing to a captive audience. The balmy breeze, some light refreshments and a few pointers from Mum made the occasion for most children a reason to believe in the true meaning of Christmas. For Newcastle, at the end of a difficult year, it was time to forget for a while and join in all the fantasy and fun of the traditional annual get-together.
I do enjoy flying, so this is my cheap form of flying.
Assistant Director of the museum, Patrick Filmer-Sankey, says there's something for everyone.
Everybody wants to fly. I think most people do. I certainly do. And this is such a wonderful way of doing it. I think there's an enormous interest in aviation out there, and these are the flying machines.
Back on the beach, Inga and Max Imler were slightly bewildered, but otherwise unharmed. Before their dunking, they'd spent a couple of hours cruising the lake in a 17-foot fiberglass runabout skippered by Inga's brother and his wife, who live at Butterbar. At the entrance to Swansea Channel, the boat suddenly flipped. But fortunately, the Redhead Surf Boat A crew were nearby.
3 of the 4 couldn't swim, and they were hanging onto the gunnels pretty tight, and we dived over and put a rescue tube around them and ferried them to the surf boat.
We were training a little bit earlier than usual. They were just fortunate that we were on the spot at the time.
There was a few waves coming through. Where they went over, it was pretty bumpy there, but with the run-out tide, the boat sort of drifted out a bit and it got a bit easier then.
The second woman on board the boat was taken to Belmont Hospital for observation, but the owner stayed with his upturned vessel as surf boat crews and the Swansea Coast Guard took it in tow from where it had drifted down the beach. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
The joint CSIRO local government release of the weevils took place at half a dozen locations along the east coast. Maitland City Council invited local children to join their release at Woodbury Swamp this morning. The bugs were liberated as either adults or in larvae form deep inside specially grown hyacinth cuttings. Children are being encouraged by the CSIRO to take an early interest in the environment, and they certainly grasp the significance of this project.
What have you done?
Let some bugs go.
What do you think they're going to do?
Eat the weed.
How long do you think it'll take?
A couple of years.
9-year-old Stuart could be celebrating his 21st birthday by the time the weevils have done their work. The CSIRO has already had one attempt at biological control of the South American water hyacinth, releasing a similar weevil some years ago. The brown patches on the weed bed show it's still at work, but the weevil species number 2 will provide valuable reinforcements.
Well, this one is supposed to take the cooler conditions out here, like the winters and the frosts. Time will tell whether it does, but it's worked well in America with cooler conditions and cooler winters over there. So hopefully it'll do the same here and survive the winters and do real damage.
Even with the best possible result, the endemic water hyacinth will only be completely controlled with herbicides.
I don't think biological will be the full answer to it, but if you can limit the use of herbicides with other methods such as biological control, I think the environment's got to be better off. So.
While many firms report an improvement in business conditions, just as many have had a downward trend. The Chamber says after 3 consecutive quarters of deteriorating economic conditions during the year, it appears Newcastle companies have been saved by a seasonal pickup due to Christmas. The Newcastle results compare favourably with gloomy statewide results, which show that 30% more firms experienced a deterioration rather than an improvement. However, the results for this quarter are still sharply down on those achieved in previous December quarters. The Chamber says the bad news is that Newcastle firms have some of the worst expectations in the state for the first quarter of the new year, which is usually due to the post-Christmas shutdown. While 11% of Newcastle firms expect business conditions to improve, 47% have forecast few orders. The poor business conditions are expected to spill over into employment, with more than 1 in 5 talking about job cuts. A disturbing feature of the survey is that a significant number of firms have cut investment in plant and equipment to improve their bottom line. With the driver dead, police are unsure of what caused the truck to leave a relatively straight stretch of the New England highway in the quiet hours of this morning. The 30-year-old man from Wagga was on his way to Moree with a load of liquid fertiliser when his vehicle veered off the highway at Ravensworth, crashing through a fence and coming to rest on its side about 20 metres from the road. The cabin broke free of the trailer, crushing the roof as it rolled. The driver was thrown from the truck. Unsure if the leaking fertiliser was hazardous, firemen were brought in to treat the spill and supervise it being decanted into another truck. And in Mayfield this morning, traffic going to and from Stockton was delayed for almost an hour after 2 cars collided head-on the Torres Street Bridge, blocking both lanes. According to police, the driver of the Red Alpha lost control, sending the car into a spin and into the oncoming traffic. Both female drivers were taken to Royal Newcastle Hospital with back and neck injuries.